So I did a session on testing yesterday. The room was less full than this, so my takeaway from that is more people are interested in not paying for Oracle BI Publisher than testing their code. Which works. Okay, so what's the problem with printing in Apex? So this is something I've wrestled with Apex since I first started to use it. I think there's a huge gap for good printing options in Oracle Apex. How many people agree with that statement? Yeah. So we all understand what the problem is. There are solutions to that problem, but we built our own solution to it because it solved the problem that we had. What I want to do in this session, it's always a tough gig when you're after lunch. Everybody's thoughts are running to the party tonight. So there are some slides to go through, but I'm a bit more interested in showing you how we built the solution and how you can use the solution, what it actually does, then drilling into the fine detail of how to actually use it. So there are a few slides. I'll jump to the demos as quickly as possible. The obligatory slide about me, my name's John Scott. I've been using Apex since it was first publicly available, around about 12 years. I've used Oracle for about 25 years. Written a couple of Oracle Apex books. If you haven't bought any Oracle Apex books, buy the one on the right, the expert book. I say this every single time. All author royalties go to the trust funds of Scott Spadafor and Carl Backstrom, two Oracle Apex development team members who sadly died. So please buy that book. It's coming up to Christmas-ish, kind of. How many people used Apex back when it looked like this? HTMLDB. You're younger than you look from here. Apex has undergone a lot of transformations. I loved the product back then. The features I've seen in Apex 5.1 this week, I'm still as passionate about the product as I was back then. It was revolutionary then. I think our future is very bright using Apex as a development tool. Hopefully this printing solution we're going to show you is going to plug one of the significant gaps, I think. So quick printing overview. What factors do you need to consider when you're looking to print out of your Apex application? Top one for most people is budget. Do you have money to spend on this? Do you need a free solution? Secondly, capabilities. Do you need to output to Excel, or is PDF enough? Do you need to output to Word and PowerPoint, and so on? How do you integrate with that product? How simple is it to do? Because if you're in a large enterprise, you might not be able to install your own server. You might need to get sign-off from the infrastructure team to actually install this thing. So the simpler it is to integrate, the more likely you are to use it and actually be able to get your hands on it. Ease of use has to be simple. If it's not simple, chances are you're not going to use it. You're going to tell your users, click the little download CSV button, sort it out yourself in Excel. So what's available today? BI Publisher, obviously top line product. It's expensive, depends if you've got the budget for it. How many people currently use BI Publisher? A few. Very rich feature set, supports all major output formats, Excel, PowerPoint, and so on. Has a lot of nice features like scheduling of reports, automatically dropping the reports onto a file server, emailing them out to your end users, and so on. So obviously all of that power comes at a cost. If you already have BI Publisher, I'd encourage you to use it. If you're paying for it, use it. Jasper Reports. How many people use Jasper Reports? So this is the option most people tend to look at after they've looked at BI Publisher and seen the price on it. It is actually a very capable print engine. Again, supports most major output formats. There is a learning curve to it, we found. There is a report designer, a nice graphical tool. When we first looked at it many, many years ago, the iReport design tool wasn't quite as nice and easy to use as it is today. So we ended up doing a lot of manual coding, but still a good free option. PLPDF, how many people use this? So again, I'm a big advocate of this. I've used it for a few years. Way back, it used to be a very procedural way to build your PDF. They've made advances in this tool to actually base it on templates and so on. Relatively cheap, so you need to factor in that trade-off of is this figure dollar worth trying to invent your own solution for this cost? Much easier to buy something in that case. There are other options. There's Apex Office Print. There are various plugins to export to Excel and so on. However, the big gap for us was there's nothing free and easy, which is kind of what everybody wants. Apex itself is easy to use and free. Node.js. People who know me know that I'm obsessed with Node.js. I started looking at it a few years ago. Martin D'Souza just did a session on Electron, which uses Node.js, integrates with Node.js. When Node.js fits into the Apex picture for me is quite often your users might want to do something that at first glance or first sounds impossible. You think, how can I make Apex do that? Using Node.js is a very good way to achieve the things that Apex would struggle to do otherwise. So for example, uploading a document and dropping it straight into a Box account or Dropbox or integrating with SharePoint, that kind of thing. There are lots of modules available for Node.js that make these kind of tasks pretty simple. So if you can get Apex to talk to Node.js, that's half the trouble. You kind of use Node.js as a proxy to do these difficult tasks. Christoph, is Christoph in the room? Yep. Christoph did a great session on Apex Pi the other day. Again, the challenge was how do you control a Raspberry Pi from an Apex application? Node.js solves that problem, helps you bridge that gap using WebSockets. So it's really powerful. So even if you think this isn't in your core area, have a look at Node.js and what I'm going to show you to kind of impress people just what Apex can do, not necessarily out the box, but what it can do when you integrate with other solutions. This session kind of goes back to 2 years ago, so almost to the day. Unfortunately, it's not to the day, but back in 2014 at Kscope 14, I presented a session on a primer on Node.js, and I ran through a whole host of weird and wonderful demos on what you can do with Node.js, and one of those demos was showing how you can generate Microsoft Office documents using Node.js. Not really factoring Apex into the equation at that stage, but just generating Word documents, Excel documents, and so on. And it was pretty cool, if I say so myself. Was anybody at that session? Oh, some people. And you came back for another session. Wow. Okay, so you're either impressed or you've completely forgotten what I was talking about. During that session, and I had many follow-on conversations with people after that, this kind of idea floated around. We could build a print engine using what I demonstrated. Because if you think about it, BI Publisher is essentially a print engine. Apex sends data to this print engine, combines it with a template, produces output, sends it back to the browser. And that's essentially what we want to do. We just want to integrate the print engine with our Apex apps as simply as possible, send it some data, design our template, and it just works. So after that session, I worked on creating a print engine using Node.js to integrate with Apex. We used it internally for quite a while. I broke my promise on releasing it to the community. 2 years later, we want to deliver on that promise now that we've got it to the point where it's stable, it works, and it kind of meets the needs of most people, I think. So using Node.js, and I'm not going to drill into a huge amount of detail on this, Node.js, think of it as a Chrome rendering engine that runs headless. So without a UI, you can script in JavaScript, and that's very useful for us because as Apex developers, we should be familiar with JavaScript. It comes with a very rich community of plugins that you can integrate with. I like to think that the print engine we created, we probably did about 5% of the work. The rest of the community did about 95% of the work because I just leveraged the plugins that are created. We did have to solve some technical challenges, but we were starting from scratch with this solution. The Node.js typical example on their homepage is how to create a web server in this many lines of code. It's their kind of de facto hello world example. So pretty simple. I'm not going to go into the demo on that. Where it starts to get interesting is this website called NPM, Node Package Manager. Or if you visit the website, Richard, I visited this for years, never noticed. Top left-hand corner, it generates a random thing that starts with NPM, and this particular one is Newcomb's Possible Manifestation for some weird and wonderful reason. What this is a repository of Node modules. So if you're ever familiar, what's that Google thing? Google Whack, is it? Where you visit Google and you try and think of something that has 0 page hits, and it's almost impossible. The reverse of that, I tried to come to this website and search for a module. SharePoint module, LDAP module, single sign-on module, facial recognition module. I never found anything that somebody hadn't written a module for. So if you need to do something, search on there. You know, transpose the heads of dogs onto cats. It's probably on there somewhere. It really is, or it will be by the end of this session. So npm.js, have a look there. Again, we leverage code from here in our module. There's over 250,000 modules on there, so a lot of code. Really easy to integrate. Very, very simple to include. Think of it like including a third-party JavaScript file in your Apex application, except we're doing it in Node. When I searched that repository, I found a bunch of things that might help with producing Office documents. There was quite a few of them. It took a bit of time to find the one that was probably best for us. Quickly honed in on this one, docxTemplater. This is all going to be in the slides. You probably don't need to jot down addresses and whatnot. We've wrapped all of this up for you. What docxTemplater does from their documentation, it's a library that generates docx, so Word and PowerPoint documents, from a docx or PowerPoint document template. It replaces placeholders in that template with data, essentially. Kind of sounds ideal, because straight away I'm thinking, right, I can just design my template in Word or in PowerPoint, put placeholders in there, substitute them at runtime with data, and have this library generate the document. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. So what does that mean? I haven't skipped this slide, you get it. So their de facto hello world example is this example, and we'll run through this live in a moment. This library, this template library, the syntax it uses for substitution strings is this: curly braces. If anybody's used handlebar or mustache, Christoph, I think you might have had reference to that in your set, no? Okay. It's known as kind of mustache or handlebar notation. If you turn it on its side, it kind of looks like a mustache. So hello name, if we pass in this data, which is JSON format data, we get, let's scroll out, we get that output. It's just a search and replace, essentially. Very, very simple. However, this library also supports programming logic as well. So it supports things like loops. And what loops let you do is, in your document template that you create, put this handlebar notation in that says, and the hash at the start of the products line here means loop round the JSON array of products. In my data here, I have a JSON array with a number of products in here. So in 3 lines of code, I'm essentially telling it loop round this. And if I passed in this data, if I passed in this data, it would produce this output. So pretty simple to work with. That's the kind of takeaway from here. It also lets you do things like conditionals. So imagine this example. You pass in some data, and that data may or may not have a telephone number, for example. In your document that you output, you don't necessarily want to include a telephone number field if the person doesn't have one. So using conditionals, you can see down at the bottom, we don't display the cat's name for Jane Doe because she doesn't have a cat, for example. So it's not just a substitution library, it's not just doing string substitutions. It lets you interact programmatically with the data, which is pretty cool. Inverted selections. So let's say, for example, I pass in an empty set of data. I don't want to display first name, surname, telephone number, and have them all blank. I might want to display a different message. So in this case, I can say, using the hat symbol, if you don't have any data in this part of the JSON document, output this instead. So you'll learn this notation as you progress. Most people, when they first start off, you just want to write the data out. You probably don't want to get into the conditional logic too much. Let's skip through the demo. So what were my goals when I set out to build this print engine? First and foremost, free. So no cost to this at all. Has to be simple to install, and it has to be simple to use, or I wouldn't use it, we wouldn't use it, and it has to meet the most common needs. And what are the most common needs that we have for print engines? Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, right? The components we're going to use for this are a Node.js web server. So there is something to install, it just needs to run somewhere. So in much the same way that you need to install a BI publisher server or a Jasper server, this needs to run somewhere. Doesn't necessarily need to run on the database machine, just needs to run somewhere that the database machine can access in terms of network connectivity. Because what's going to happen from your Apex application, it's going to send some data to the print engine, combine it with a template, send the output back to the user. There's a PL SQL component here. I'm not going to drill into a huge amount of detail, but we've built out a whole API for you here that's going to easily allow you to upload a template to the server, so you're going to be able to give your end users the ability to upload their own templates. Those templates can live inside the database, inside your Apex app, in static files, or they can sit on the print server. Completely up to you. We've tried to make this as flexible as possible. Apex plugins, because you don't want to do manual code, you want to drop in an Apex plugin, set it up, and just run with it. So again, making it as simple as possible. And the template engine, well, we're kind of leveraging what these node modules do anyway, but we're going to do a better job of kind of documenting them for Apex users in that sense, because we're not dealing with static data, we're dealing with data from the database. Make sense? Yeah. Any questions? No? Cool. So, let's jump into demo. So, I've left actually on this slide, what we're looking for are some beta testers to get involved with this. There is a GitHub repository for people to download this from. There's nothing there yet. There will be in 30 days' time. We've spoken to a number of people while we've been out at this conference. Some people have given great feedback on features they'd like to include. So what I want to do is have a 30-day open beta session, get some feedback from people, implement that in before doing first official release. So if you're interested in getting involved in that beta, contact me on Twitter, send me an email, go to the GitHub site, post a question, collar me in the corridor. Anything works. Buy me a beer tonight when they're free. That doesn't work. So demo, right, let's jump in. So what I've got, and I'll apologize in advance, I'm going to be jumping around a number of places purely because of the mechanism of creating a template, uploading it onto the server. So I'll try and explicitly say when I'm on the server side versus my laptop side and so on. But please shout out if you have any questions. So first of all, let's have an introduction to those node modules that I discussed, the docxTemplater module, so you can see how that works. So let's go here, and I'm on my local laptop right now, and I have a number of node scripts. This script is pretty much the hello world example from the docxTemplater module website that I told you about. If you're not familiar with Node, think of this just like JavaScript, essentially. The syntax should be quite familiar to you. These require statements, I'm basically including the library here. So I'm including the file system library because I want to read a document, I want to write a document, and I include the docxTemplater library here. Now I'm going to read in my template, which is just a Word document. So that's this line. It's got to read the input.docx file. I'm going to instantiate the docxTemplater library. Then this set data command is just setting some JSON data, applying it to the template. Does that make sense? Yes, John? Yes. Thank you. It's after lunch, I know. This line, this is the all-important line, doc.render, that does all the hard work. I've loaded a template, I've assigned some data to it, now I'm going to render it out. And then my final line, I write it out to a new Word document to the file system. So this is outside of Apex right now. We're just doing it purely at the file system level. So let me show you what that template looks like. So I want to be completely transparent that there's no kind of smoke and mirrors going on here. This is a Word document that only contains that. So as I said, very simple syntax. Those are my substitution variables: first name, last name, description. And if we have a look back at the script, you can see I'm setting the JSON data: first name, last name, description. So let's give it a run. So node 0.docx. Not very exciting, it doesn't display anything, but what it did do is generate this output.docx file. Let's open that up, and we have some data in it. Pretty cool. Can I finish there? Is that impressive enough? Okay, let's keep going. It would be pretty tedious to do that for your end users every time, kind of manually do that. So let's step it up a little bit. But hopefully the key thing for me, and the people I work with will attest, if you want the worst designed Word document or PowerPoint document possible, give it to me to design. I'm not a Word or Office person at all. What this solution gives to me is the ability for me to say to the end user, send me a PowerPoint. Send me a PowerPoint that you're manually creating today, or a Word document you're manually creating today. We'll look at the data that's in there and we'll put in substitution strings. We'll then come up with a SQL query to get that data from the database and make it happen. So this is a great option to let your users go wild and kind of tell them, go wild with whatever you can do in Word, in Excel, in PowerPoint, and so on. So let's have a look at next example here. So docx loop. So previously, the data we used just had one line of data in the JSON document. Here I have an array with two people in the people array. Me and Paul. Sorry, Paul, I didn't ask your permission to use it in this demo. And we pretty much do exactly as we did before. This time, I'm using a different template, looptemplate.docx. Let me show you that, because I want to show you how easy it is. What did I call it? Looptemplate.docx. So the notation we have here is slightly different. Remember I said the hash. Apologies for the resolution, I'm zoomed right in. The hashtag means loop around the people array in my JSON document. Same notation we had before, the handlebar notation, and then stop looping. But the nice thing about this is I can do that loop as many times as I want in the document. It doesn't just have to be once. So here I've got a standard Word table, just inserted a table, and on the line level said loop round each user kind of output. Make sense? Excellent. Okay, so let's run that example. Again, that should have produced a document called output, and there we go. We have two rows in the table. Pretty simple? Yeah? Okay. But still no Apex yet. Okay. Next one, I think I have a conditional one. So this one's using a different template again, conditional template. Same set of data we have here, but here I'm using a Boolean value in the JSON document to say, has Twitter? Does the user have a Twitter profile or not? And then there's another attribute to point to the Twitter handle. So I want to show you the use case where some of your data might have an attribute, some doesn't. How do you handle that? So let's run this and open the output. And here, you'll notice the difference here. Because my record had that attribute and the other one didn't, we don't get that ugly blank line for the second users. Make sense? Cool. Right. Okay. So, other example. So look here. PowerPoint. So, same kind of example, we just have a PowerPoint template here. Same data. Pretty much the same commands here. We've just told it to use a PowerPoint template. So let's run this. And that should have created an output.powerpoint file. And hopefully, so I've gone with a bit more of a glamorous PowerPoint theme here. And I've iterated around my users here. Pretty cool? Sorry?
Nice design.
Thank you. So, I can't take credit for it. So, let me just show you the template there. And I should have prefixed this. So this is the template I'm looking at now. And it is just one of the standard PowerPoint templates available here. I just picked that one. And in my page where I list out the users, same notation, loop around the people array, output a bullet point. You notice, in my document, I just did a standard bullet point there. Didn't have to do any fancy markup. So, does it look simple to use so far? Cool. I should have prefixed this with, I am heavily reliant on Microsoft tools in this demo, so I am slightly on edge if it's going to work. So, that's it. We can create Word documents, we can create PowerPoint documents. We can't create Excel documents using this library, unfortunately, so that would have been ideal if we could. However, I found a separate library that does allow you to create Excel documents, and we've embedded that into the solution that we're releasing. For you, as end users, it'll be completely transparent. You'll just say, create an Excel, create a Word document, whatever. So let's have a look at Excel. Similar kind of idea here. Let's have a look at 1-server. All the code's going to be available on GitHub to look through. Question? Yeah.
If you put a field into your document and you don't include that in the data that's through, does that get removed?
Yeah, so the question is, if I put a field into the document that wasn't in the data, is that the way around you said? Sorry?
It wasn't in the JSON that you sent.
Yeah, so if I include a field in the document that isn't in the JSON that I send across, usually what you'll see in the document is undefined. You can choose to say, just don't display it. Usually I'd use undefined just as a sanity check if you're expecting that data to be there. Otherwise, I'd use the conditional logic that I showed you earlier to say, if it has this attribute, output it. If it doesn't, don't. So here's the example from this module, which is called XLSX template. Very, very similar to the other module. Again, we've wrapped all of this up, so don't get too tied down in the code here. We set up an array of data, slightly different this time because we're working with Excel. So we have an array of dates here, an array of people. We substitute these values on a particular sheet in the Excel document, and then we generate the output called output.xlsx. So let's try that. Node 1.server should have generated output.xlsx. And there you go. Now we have an Excel document. Pretty cool? So usually at this point somebody says, probably could have done that just downloading to CSV. However, the number of times we've run into users doing that and then dates aren't really dates in the document and that kind of thing, this solution solves that, because if I click on that date value there, as far as Excel's concerned, that is a proper date column. I can do formulas in my templates, I can do calculations, all kind of things. This is a native Excel document. It's not a CSV that's been imported to an Excel document. So let's have a look at the next example here. A bit more of, what's this one do? Let's just run it. It looks like the same data. I got a bit demo happy with these templates. It's the first time in a long time that Word and Excel have worked for me, so I got a little bit carried away. So let's run that. That should generate output.xlsx. And this one, in my template, I just predefined those cells as a table. And down here, I've got a calculation in my template, which is the average of these cells, which come from the data that I'm putting in. So that in itself is kind of worth the price of entry, even though the price of entry is free. The number of times our users download from an interactive report, say a CSV document, they manipulate the data manually themselves, put in formulas and so on. Now just ask them for the end template, the end document that they manually create, and then substitute out the values in this. They do all the calculations and everything. Jason?
Excuse me if I'm getting ahead of you, but is there any chance that we might actually be able to print basic charts with this too?
You're ahead by about 20 minutes with that question. Yeah.
Then I will wait.
So, can you? Thank you. Yeah, so the question was, is there any chance you can print out basic charts for this kind of thing? So, possibly, let's say. So although I might ask you to come up and create the template, Jason, because I know. Yeah.
I have no delusions.
So, let's have a look at the next example. So, this one does something a little bit different. So we have an application, well, we have many applications, but we have a particular application where I think we have about 5 or 6 tabs. Each tab has a report on it. And what the user does, every financial quarter, they visit this application, they go to tab 1, they download the CSV, or this is what they used to do. Go to tab 2, download CSV, I can see nodding people, take all the CSVs, combine them into one document. A bit tedious. So what this will do is actually iterate around multiple tabs in the document. So you're not just restricted to substituting in a single tab. What we can do is, let's say, this one, open output, and, oh, actually, I was jumping ahead. So in this one, we've actually created a table and a second sheet, which is a pivot table. So I'll come back to the multi one. So basically, the point I'm trying to get across here is anything you can do in Excel, you can do with this print server. Just design your template, do your pivot tables, your charts, or whatever, as you would normally, and it should just work. So let's go. Let's have a look at the multi one. Funnily enough, I called the multi example multi. So here we have, yeah.
The JavaScript is hard coding the values, right?
Yeah.
So can we obtain it dynamically?
Yeah, so right now this is all, Apex isn't in the equation right now. It's going to get very dynamic in about 3 minutes, I would say. So this is just to illustrate what these libraries do for you. We're going to build on top of it. Very good question. So here we have some static data. Just to illustrate, we have 2 different sets of data here. We've got places and we've got people. They might want to live in different places in your Excel document. So let's run this and open output.xlsx. And on my first tab, I have my list of places. Oops, sorry, second tab, I have my list of places. First tab, I have my list of people. And to create that output, just have a look. What was the name template? Multi-template. Let me just show you how I did that. So my multi-template is just an Excel document that in this cell, slightly different notation for Excel, but again, this will all be documented. We say in table format, so generate rows for this data. In table format, iterate around each place and output the name column. So you could output as many columns as you like. It's just going to populate rows on each sheet. So that's on the name tab. On the people tab, it just iterates around the other part of the JSON document. So very simple to do. You could create an Excel document with 20 different tabs if you want that aggregates data from different places. So, pretty cool? Okay. So, great, but how do we get Apex to talk to it? So, I've shown you how to create those documents from the command line. Again, we're going to use Node to do this, and the simplest way to do it is, or simplest way I thought to do it, is create a web server. That web server just listens for requests coming from Apex, does something with them, returns the result back to Apex. Apex handles it. So we created a little, oops. So let me just jump to my local server here. Where am I? So I'm now running this from a virtual machine, rather than locally on my laptop. So CD Express. And here, what we did in Node.js is create a little web server. Very, very simple, basic hello world type web server. Loads of examples on the internet on how to do this. We include a Node module called Express. We tell it to listen for anybody posting to /kscope. So if you think about how you access websites, exactly the same concept here. It's creating a web server that listens for that particular URL. It extracts the text that's sent to it, does a console.log, and then returns a response, you said, whatever you sent to me. So it's a bit of a kind of ping-pong type web server. So I'll run that web server. Actually, let me kill that, run it a bit higher up. So you can see, get a little bit of output. This web server is listening on port 6000. So in my Apex application, I can now hit this Express button, and it says, you said hello server. So it sent the contents of that text box to the Express web server. The Express web server then returned this text that it received and prepended the you said message. So we now have kind of interaction between, again, similar to Christoph's Raspberry Pi example. So very, very simple to do. So we can now combine the two things that we've just seen. We have a web server that lets us send information from Apex to this web server. The web server does something with it, sends content back, and then you saw the Node modules that allow us to do Word document creation, Excel document creation, and so on. Everybody with me? Yeah. Cool. We're still at a basic level here, so need to step it up a notch. So here's a slightly more advanced example. Same concept, except this time, remember the JSON data that I was hard coding before, to your point? I'm going to post this JSON data out of this text area to my Express server, and that's returned some content. By default, I'm telling it to return it as a file I can download rather than auto-open, and that's my Word document back. So now we have Apex sending data to a web server. The web server produces a Word document, and we get it back. Impressive? Yeah. So, and the sound of one hand clapping there. So, thanks, Jason. So, just to prove, because there's bound to be somebody, even me, thinking, well, that's just a hard-coded Word document. We don't believe you, John. So, let's just change the data slightly. And my phone number. Oh, maybe not put in my phone number. And then Paul. Yeah. Apex 5.1, packaged apps. Save. Output. And now you can see the text changed. So it is live, it is real data. Thank you. But the template looks horrible. But you get the concept. If you designed a nice looking template, you can start to do some really nice things with it. So this is still hard-coded text. How do we make it dynamic? So let's go, oops. To do that was all planned, by the way. So let's go and run my real web server now. My proper Etch server. Just make sure we are pointing correctly. Get a version number. Pre-flight checks work. So, let me just check something here a second. So here's a slightly adapted example. So I've set up my application to point to the web server that we've got running. This time, instead of hard-coded text, I've got a SQL query. There's some magic behind the scenes that's going to take that SQL query, run it, generate JSON data from it, and then send that JSON data to the print server. And I can select a template here that I want to use. So let's choose Kscope session template, and hopefully, if the stars align, we'll click here, and oops. Oh, that's okay. I did select star from emp. That's okay. Let me. Nobody shouted out, John, you've used the wrong query. Not a single one of you. Okay. Let's have a look at my predefined query here. Let's go there. On that. On that. So it's not star from emp. I've actually got a table which has got some presenters in, abstracts, and so on. Let's choose that document template. Hit this. Hit save. Hit test. So this time we actually get the abstract name, the presenter name, and the abstract coming from the database now. Pretty cool? Oops. What I should have done, or what I could have done, is actually put a macro into my template to say, oops, to say auto update the table of contents, which is also driven by data. So, which is another nice little cool feature. So, where do we go next? What happens if I click PDF on there? So, if I click PDF, I haven't had to change anything, but I get my nice PDF output. Exactly the same content, but now it's a native PDF. The only thing I've told it to do is, instead of outputting a docx file, output a PDF file. Still use the Word document, so it's going to produce it as though it's a Word document and then convert it to PDF. So this should be a very faithful translation from the original Word document, if that makes sense. Sorry, question?
What's the least version that this works with?
Least version of... so the question is, what's the least version of Apex this works with? That's a really good question. I want to say, because I'm testing it with Apex 5, it does utilize some of the Apex JSON package, which is in Apex 5, but I think was released in 4.2 kind of accidentally. I can't remember.
So there doesn't matter what that version of 5?
Doesn't matter what version of 5. Yeah. I have got some code in there that doesn't use the Apex JSON utility in Apex 5, so it should work in Apex 4. It's just better to upgrade to Apex 5 for a whole host of other reasons. It's more performant. Yeah. 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 People are going to start thinking I've paid you to plant these questions, so that's in about 10 minutes' time. So the question was, okay, John, great, you're typing in a SQL query here, but I already have a report in the application. Surely you can pull out the SQL query from the report? Is that kind of the question?
Well, like, I mean, like, you can have multiple different queries, like 4 or 5 queries
Yeah.
in the one report.
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yeah. If you can write a query, it'll work. If the query's valid, it will work. Yeah. Nils? Yeah. So the question was, John, are you crazy? Are you running this in production environment? Yes, we are. Yes. Yeah. After a lot of testing, I mean, the worst that's going to happen is that the user presses the button and nothing works, because if there's a failure of the print engine and so on. But yeah, generally it's just passing some data, doing some work with it, passing it back. When you first start using it, you might have some issues creating the template, getting the substitution strings in the template matching up to the data you send across. But generally, if it produces a document, you might just be missing some of the substitutions. But yeah, generally works fine. Yeah, question?
How about grouping and subtotals, totals?
Yeah, so the question is, what about grouping, subtotals, and so on? This is where I defer to Oracle. If you can write a SQL query to do that, it will handle it. So the key is here, generate the data in the JSON statement that you want to include in your template. So, and I'll show you in a moment just how flexible it can be.
So you put one of your loops inside of another loop.
Yeah, exactly. And if I have time, I'll show that. So, because we have some way cooler demos to show, I think.
Can the document be directly sent to the printer or the client's printer?
Automatically. So the question was, can the document be sent to the client's printer automatically? That is outside of the scope of this, I would say. I am aware of some plug-in solutions.
Maybe with the macro?
Maybe with macro, yeah, I'm outside, yeah.
Send it to a PDF.
Yeah.
PS, no, a PDF.
Yeah, possibly.
PS, that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
PDF to PS to the printer.
Yeah, outside of my core area, I'm afraid. There is a roadmap for what I want to do with this. So this is all kind of more focused on user interaction, producing them, but the roadmap is basically mimicking what BI Publisher does. So we want to schedule reports.
And so too is the PDF to PS trick.
Say again, sorry?
That's what the BI Publisher does as well.
Yeah.
PDF to PS and then to the printer.
So the comment there was BI Publisher does PDF to PostScript translation to send straight to the printer as well. So I guess you have a Word document, you've got a PDF. Whatever method you use to send that to a printer in another solution, it should be the same with this. So one last question, and then I have got some cooler things.
If I have an interactive report or a classic report,
Yeah. So the question is, I have an interactive report and a classic report. 2 minutes. So I don't want to say I have a lot of problems. Almost every problem you'll have encountered with printing, we've had them as well. So this is to solve kind of all the pain points we had. So how are we doing for time? 14 minutes? I think we can do this. So let me just show you something else. So here we printed out the presenters, right? So let's just take that one step further, because there was one big thing missing from that. Let me show you. Oops. Text. Let me just do this, and hopefully this will work. Okay, stating the obvious, it will either work or it won't work. Okay, kind of the same demo as before, printing a Word document. This time we have a picture. The picture is stored in the database in a table in a blob column. So the query I used, if anybody was really fast and noticed the query, there's a couple of ways to do this. I can't just easily send a picture across to the print server. What I have to do is base64 encode that image so I can send it as part of the JSON payload. So here, I could have written a helper utility with the solution to do it, but actually Apex Web Service, part of Apex, contains a function that'll do that for you. So just call Apex Web Service blob to clob base64. The profile picture is my blob column, and just alias it as image data. And it's important to say as image data, so the print engine knows that base64 encoded data is a picture that it should unencode and embed in your document. If you're doing things like your company logo, for example, that kind of thing, you probably don't want to pull out the database every time. What you can do is store that on the print server and do something like logo.png as logo, and
Or include it in your template.
sorry,
Or include it in your template.
or include it in your template. Yeah. So what that will do, the print engine will say this is a file that exists on my file in my directory, and I'll just include that and embed that. So great point, you could include it in your template if you wanted to, but this could access network drives, for example. So some other process could generate these images, and you just include them. Pretty cool?
Yep. Very cool.
So, got 10 minutes, so let's jump ahead. So we had the question before, reports. So I have a static report and an interactive report. I don't really want to do what I've just done, which is separate or divorce the query I'm using in my report from the query I'm using in my print engine, because I might add a column to the report, forget to update in my query for printing, and then they're kind of out of line. So here we have the same example. I just have a print button. Click that, and I think this should be the same template. So it's just the one that doesn't have an image in it. And what's happening behind the scenes there is, let me show you some code. What we did, remember at the start I said we created an Apex plugin for this. So in my Apex application, I have a button, just a regular button. The only thing that does is submit the page. There's no magic behind that button. Here in our processes section is our plugin. What I'll do, I'll just create a brand new process plugin. So kscope, oops, not even close. Kscope print, and our type is the plugin we've created, which we call AEH. I'm open to people telling me how silly that name is. One thing I can't do is name things, which isn't good when you have a 4-year-old son. So you're going to need to set certain attributes in your plugin. First one is, where is my print engine server? So give it a URL. The next one is, where does my data come from? And this is all common sense stuff. Where does my data come from? Is it a SQL query? I could type a SQL query in there. The next one is it PL SQL routine? Is it more dynamic than a SQL statement could be? Just call a block of PL SQL. The only thing the PL SQL has to do is produce JSON data. Does it come from an application or page item? That's what I was doing in those earlier examples. I was just saying use whatever's in that text area, whatever the user types in. The key one is static report or interactive report. If you choose static report, what you'll need to do is put in the static report ID that points to the static report you want to pull the query from. At runtime, what it'll do, as you pointed out, is go to the data dictionary in Apex and get the SQL query that you're using in that static report. So if you change it, they'll always be in sync. Does that make sense? Ditto for interactive report. So if you change your interactive report query, it will extract that, and it's smarter than that because it will take the bind variables into account before somebody asks that. The other thing you're going to want to do is, what output do I want? docx, PowerPoint, Excel, PDF. Simple as that, choosing. That could be driven from a page item as well. So if you didn't want 4 different buttons, you could give the user a select list and 1 print button, and they kind of choose. Output file name. You can either hard code something, or all of these things are substituted at runtime. So you could give your user the ability to type in the file name or auto-generate it or whatever. Template name. Oops, sorry. This option, where is my template? All of my templates so far have been on the server, so they've actually been on the server for performance reasons. They could live in the database. I could use the SQL query to extract them from a blob column, or they could be in the static files of the application. Make sense?
Yeah.
You can see how kind of flexible it is here.
URL can that be defined also dynamically because of different environments?
So that again?
The server URL.
Oh yeah. So in fact, in my example, I think the server URL, I use a page item in there to define it. You could use a page item and a computation to read it from a table if you wanted to, however you want to do it. Again, as I say, we've kind of encountered every issue with this, so we put a bit of thought into it. So that was, we've got 5 minutes, so let me just jump in. So, did I click the, I've lost track, did I click that one? I did, yeah, let's click this one. We've reached the point of the demo where it's, which button do I click again? So, now let's produce an Excel document out of that. So you can see we're just taking the same data from that static report. We can output it in different output formats for the users. Pretty flexible. Let's jump ahead to this one. This one's slightly different, interactive report. I did the same thing here. I just said use an interactive report static ID, and hopefully stars being aligned. We click on docx and give it a second. We get the output. Again, remember, same template we had before. Cool?
Yeah.
Not cool enough, though, obviously. What happens if we filter that report? Users filtered it. We hit docx. Now we get one record instead of two. Not cool enough.
The photo in the interactive report.
Sorry?
The photo in the interactive
5 minutes. Thank you. What was that question?
Sorry, is the photo in the interactive report, is that converted to basic report?
It is. Yeah. So the question was, is the photo converted to base 64? Yes, absolutely. So 5 minutes to go. I think we might just do this. So there's a little button next to this, IR+. Anybody guess what this does? So slightly different, this one. Let's click here. And, oops, too big. Now we're using a template that says, here's the report that you wanted. Just that's some standard text. The key thing here is that's exactly what I'm seeing in my interactive report. So the example I just showed you, I kind of produced different output to what I was seeing. Now it's exactly what's seen on the screen for the end user. So again, if I filter my interactive report, print, do that, we get one record in. Let's go a bit more complicated. You know when you're about to do something, you think, I'm going to regret this, but let's try it. Let's say that. Let's say presenter equals that one. Okay. Print. Okay. Do that. So that was a pain point we always found with the users. They could download the interactive report in CSV format or whatever, never match what was on the screen. So this is intended to match exactly what's on the screen.
Is it just the screen, or the screen 4, is it, well, if you've got, say, 500 rows
Yeah.
in the result set, is it
Yeah.
showing 500?
It's taking whatever's on the screen. So yeah, the screen's the screen. So because Apex is responsive, if you shrunk this down, went mobile, it would. It's this version is intended to show exactly what's on the screen. If you wanted it slightly different, you'd use a different template. Quick question, then there's one more thing I want to show.
When you do a scrape like this, is there a mechanism to actually like not include the filter set or not include only do the body?
Yeah, there is exactly. So behind, so great question. So is there the question was, is there an option to kind of constrain it just to the rows themselves, not include the header of the interactive report and so on? Yes, basically the plugin, you say what the static ID is of the interactive report, and then you can give it a little jQuery selector to say include this region, so you can get it down to whatever you want. I believe there is one last example that I wanted to show. Let me just try something. Let's see if this example works. Oops. I'll try this. Now I think we are almost out of time. Please work. I'll check my server. Server didn't complain, which is always a good sign. Give it a second. Come on. Employees. Again, nobody told me wrong query, John. Nobody said. So let's do select star from emp. Excel. 10 seconds left. Let's see if this works. So to the question before about embedding charts, in my template I just embedded whatever you can do in Excel, which lets me, do cool things. Let's say that and that. So all of that is just driven from select star from emp, and it generates that output. And we can say where sal greater than 1,000 to filter it on this side, and so on. Oops. And now I'm restricting it on the application side. Pretty cool? Yeah. Thank you. So where do you go? How do you get it? So, a couple of ways to contact me. Either follow on, let me see, either ping me on Twitter, Apex Evangelist JS, my initials, AEJS. Drop me an email,